The call for help. In the cold silence of space, a faint signal flickered through the galaxy. It was weak and broken, yet it carried an urgency that no advanced translation system could ignore. Desperation. Strength. Help us before it's too late. The message repeated over and over, echoing through Earth's deep space relay stations. Captain Alina Reed sat in the control room of the Stellar Dawn, the pride of humanity's exploratory fleet. Her sharp green eyes scanned the report in front of her. Around her, the hum of activity filled the air as technicians and officers worked to pinpoint the source of the mysterious transmission. "It's coming from Sector 9 Theta," said Lieutenant Marco Diaz, the ship's navigator. His voice carried a mix of excitement and dread. "A rogue planet, uncharted but flagged for unusual gravitational anomalies." "Rogue planet?" Reed asked, her brow furrowing. She leaned forward, her fingers tapping lightly on the console. "What do we know about it?" "Not much, Captain," Diaz admitted. "The records indicate it's barren, orbitless, and surrounded by a dense field of debris. No recorded life signs." The room fell silent. A rogue planet with no life signs, yet broadcasting a desperate plea for help. It didn't add up. But then, in space, not much ever did. Reed straightened, her voice steady. "Send a probe to scan the area. Let's confirm if this is worth investigating." Minutes later, the probe's feed came alive on the main display. The rogue planet loomed on the screen, a shadowy sphere encased in swirling clouds. The surface was jagged, as if the planet had been torn apart by some cosmic disaster. Amid the darkness, faint glimmers of light flickered. Artificial, unmistakably engineered. "Captain," said Dr. Alina Fors, the ship's xenolinguist, stepping closer to the console. "I've analyzed the signal further. It's repeating a phrase in an ancient dialect, one that hints at intelligent life, or at least survivors." Reed's gut tightened. This could be a trap. Many spacefaring civilizations had learned the hard way to avoid uncharted signals. But something about the desperation in the message struck a chord. Whoever, or whatever, was out there sounded genuinely terrified. "Set a course," Reed ordered, her voice firm. "If there's even a chance someone needs help, we're not turning our backs." The journey to Sector 9 Theta was fraught with challenges. The debris field surrounding the rogue planet seemed almost alive, shifting unpredictably and throwing off their navigation systems. Asteroids the size of small moons drifted dangerously close, forcing the crew into tense hours of manual steering. "Captain, we're approaching the planet," Diaz announced after what felt like an eternity. The tension in his voice was palpable. "Bring us into low orbit," Reed instructed, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "And activate the planetary scanners. I want eyes on the surface." The scanners hummed to life, sending beams of energy across the planet's jagged surface. The feed displayed ruined cities, their structures twisted and broken, as if by some colossal force. What remained was barely recognizable: fragments of buildings, shattered domes, and scorched landscapes. "There," said Fors, pointing to a faint heat signature on the scanner. "That's not natural. It's coming from a central location, possibly a bunker or a hidden facility." "Marco, plot a landing course," Reed ordered. "And prepare the shuttle." Diaz hesitated. "Captain, with all due respect, this planet doesn't exactly scream safe. We've seen no life signs except for that heat source. If we land, we risk everything." Reed finished for him. Her voice softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "I know the risks, Lieutenant, but if there's even one survivor down there, they're worth it." The shuttle descended through the planet's thick atmosphere, turbulence shaking the crew. Reed sat at the helm, her knuckles white against the controls. Outside, the dark clouds swirled, flashing with bursts of lightning. When the shuttle finally broke through, the surface came into view. It was worse than the scans had suggested. The ground was a wasteland of jagged rocks and blackened craters, with no signs of vegetation or water. The only light came from the bunker ahead, a faint, flickering glow that seemed to beckon them. As they landed, Reed grabbed her helmet and stood, her gaze steady. "Stay sharp," she said to the crew. "We don't know what we're walking into." The bunker's entrance was sealed, but not for long. With a few precise cuts from the ship's laser tools, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit corridor. The air was thick and stale, carrying the scent of decay. "Captain," whispered Fours, pointing to the walls. Symbols were etched into the metal, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. "This isn't human, but it's not entirely alien either." Reed stepped forward, her heart pounding. At the end of the corridor, a figure emerged, a tall, thin being with hollow eyes and tattered robes. It raised a hand, trembling, and spoke in a voice that sent chills down their spines. "You came," it rasped. "Desperation is all we have left." Into the abyss, the stellar dawn orbited silently above the rogue planet, its hull gleaming faintly against the black void. Inside the ship, Captain Alina Reed stood in the command center, staring at the feed from the bunker's entrance. The thin alien figure they had encountered below had uttered only a single sentence before collapsing. Its frail body now rested in the shuttle's medical bay. "What do we know about him?" Reed asked, her voice low but sharp. Dr. Alina Fours stood nearby, studying the alien's readings. "Humanoid physiology, but his cellular structure is breaking down at an alarming rate. It's like he's burning himself alive just by existing." Reed frowned. "Burning? What's causing it?" Before Fours could respond, an alarm blared across the ship. Lieutenant Marco Diaz's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, we've got a problem. Scanners are picking up movement in the planet's debris field. Something big is headed our way." Reed's gut clenched as she moved swiftly to the bridge. On the main display, a massive shadow loomed against the backdrop of space. It wasn't an asteroid. The object moved too deliberately, its shape angular and sharp, like a predator stalking its prey. "It's a ship," Diaz said, his voice taut. "But it's not broadcasting any signals, and it's heading straight for us." "Battle stations," Reed commanded. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." On the surface, the remaining crew members explored the depths of the bunker. The corridor stretched further than they had expected, winding into the heart of the planet. Dim, flickering lights revealed more of the strange glowing symbols etched into the walls. "Anyone else feel like we're walking into a trap?" whispered Ensign Meko Tanaka, gripping her plasma rifle tightly. "No traps," Zekar's weak voice echoed from behind them. The alien had regained enough strength to walk, though his movements were slow and labored. "This place, sanctuary. Long ago, it was our last hope." "Last hope from what?" asked Chief Engineer Calavas. Her voice was skeptical, but her eyes darted warily to the symbols around them. "The unseen," Zekar said, his voice trembling. "They destroyed everything. Our cities, our people. We hid here, hoping, praying, that they wouldn't follow." Tanaka stopped in her tracks. Wait. Unseen? What are we dealing with here? Ghosts?" Zekar's hollow eyes locked onto hers. "Worse. They feed on despair. They grow stronger the more you fear them. And they are always watching." Above the planet, the stellar dawn was locked in a deadly dance with the unidentified ship. The enemy vessel unleashed beams of energy that crackled against the dawn's shields, making the entire ship shudder. "Shields at 60%, shouted Lieutenant Diaz, his hands flying over the controls. "We can't keep this up, Captain." Reed clenched her jaw. The Dawn was equipped for exploration, not combat. Yet retreating would leave her crew on the surface stranded. She couldn't let that happen. "Divert all power to the forward thrusters," she ordered. "Let's see if they can keep up with us." The Dawn surged forward, weaving through the dense debris field. Behind them, the enemy ship hesitated, its bulky frame struggling to maneuver through the chaos. But it wasn't long before it resumed the chase, firing relentlessly. Deep within the bunker, Zekar led the team to a massive chamber. The walls were lined with ancient machinery, some of it still humming faintly with power. In the center of the room stood a glowing sphere, pulsating with a soft, rhythmic light. "This is it," Zakar said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Our heart of strength. It feeds on desperation and gives us the power to fight back." Reed's team exchanged uneasy glances. The sphere was mesmerizing, its glow tugging at their senses in ways they couldn't explain. It felt alive. "What exactly does it do?" Voss asked, stepping closer. "It amplifies emotions," Zakar explained. "In our darkest moments, when all seemed lost, it allowed us to push beyond our limits. But it comes at a price. It drains the user until there's nothing left." Tanaka stepped back, her face pale. "You're saying this thing kills whoever uses it?" Zakar nodded solemnly. "Desperation has always been a double-edged sword." Before they could ask more, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the glow of the sphere flickered erratically. "They found us," Zakar whispered, his voice barely audible. "The unseen are here." Back on the stellar dawn, alarms blared louder as the enemy ship closed the distance. Reed's knuckles turned white against the command console. "We can't outlast them, Captain," Diaz warned. "We need another option." Reed's mind raced. She glanced at the planet below, and then at the enemy ship on the display. "If we can draw them into the debris field's core, their ship might not survive the gravitational anomalies." Diaz's eyes widened. "That's suicide." "It's a risk we have to take," Reed said firmly. "If we don't, none of us are getting out of this alive." As the dawn veered deeper into the chaos of the debris field, Reed could only hope her crew below was faring better than they were. But deep down, she knew that desperation would soon test them all. The unseen threat. The ground shook violently as Captain Reed and her team braced themselves in the bunker's central chamber. The glowing sphere at the room's core pulsed erratically, its light dimming and flaring in rapid bursts. Zakar staggered, clutching his chest, as though he could feel the tremors in his very soul. "They are here," Zakar whispered, his voice trembling. "The unseen have followed you. They sense your fear." The team exchanged tense glances. Ensign Tanaka tightened her grip on her plasma rifle. "What are we supposed to do?" "Fight invisible monsters." Zakar turned to her, his hollow eyes gleaming faintly in the flickering light. "Not invisible. Unseen because they exist in the cracks between our reality and theirs. They feed on fear, despair, hopelessness. You must not give them power." Suddenly, the room grew colder, and a low guttural hum resonated from the walls. The lights flickered and dimmed further, plunging the chamber into eerie semi-darkness. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the floor, moving like liquid, independent of the dim light source. "What the hell is that?" muttered Chief Engineer Voss, stepping closer to Reed. A shape began to emerge from the shadows, a twisting, inky form that defied logic. Its edges blurred as if reality itself refused to acknowledge its presence. It emitted a bone-chilling sound, a mix of a growl and a shriek that set every nerve on edge. "The unseen," Zakar said grimly, stepping forward. His hands trembled as he reached toward the glowing sphere. "I must draw their attention. You have to escape." "No," Reed snapped. Her voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. "We don't leave anyone behind. If we're fighting, we fight together." Zakar hesitated, surprised by her resolve. "You don't understand. Their strength comes from despair. The more you fear them, the stronger they become." Above the planet, the stellar dawn danced dangerously close to destruction. The enemy ship, relentless in its pursuit, had begun firing erratic, unpredictable salvos. Sparks flew across the dawn's bridge as a direct hit caused one of their shields to fail. "Captain, shields at 30%, shouted Lieutenant Diaz, his voice strained with panic. "Keep us moving," Reed barked over the comms. "Draw them deeper into the debris field." The enemy vessel seemed almost alive, adjusting its movements with uncanny precision. But as it followed the dawn deeper into the debris field, the gravitational anomalies began to wreak havoc on its systems. Sections of the enemy ship's hull began to buckle under the strain. "They're taking damage," Diaz reported, a glimmer of hope in his voice. "But so are we. This field isn't going to let us out unscathed." Reed gritted her teeth. "We just need to last longer than they do." Back in the bunker, the unseen surged forward, their distorted forms reaching for the team like tendrils of shadow. Reed stood firm, her plasma pistol drawn. She fired, but the shots dissolved into nothingness before they could hit their target. "They're not physical," Voss said, her voice rising in panic. "We can't fight them like this." Zikar's hands rested on the glowing sphere, his body shaking. "They can't be destroyed. But the sphere, it can repel them for a time." "What's the catch?" Reed asked, already knowing the answer. Zikar met her gaze, his expression hollow. "It will take everything from me." "No," Reed said sharply. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Zikar shouted, his voice breaking. "Do you think I haven't tried? My people, my family, all gone because I was too afraid to use it." The unseen closed in, their twisted forms looming over the group. Reed made a split-second decision. "If we can't fight them, we distract them. Tanaka, Voss, keep their attention. Zikar, hold off. Let me think." Voss gave her a sharp nod and threw a flash grenade. The sudden burst of light seemed to momentarily confuse the unseen, their tendrils recoiling. Tanaka took the opportunity to fire her rifle wildly, creating more distractions. Reed turned back to Zikar. "What if we combine your desperation with hope? Balance it somehow." Zikar looked at her, puzzled. "Hope weakens them. Yes, but I've never seen it weaponized." Reed grabbed his arm. "Then we'll figure it out together. You're not doing this alone." The unseen began to regroup, their forms growing sharper, more defined. The room's temperature plummeted further, and the walls seemed to close in. Reed's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Voss, can you connect this sphere to our ship's systems? Use its energy output to amplify a signal?" Reed asked. Voss frowned but quickly began examining the sphere's base. "It's risky, but I think I can rig something. What kind of signal are you thinking?" Reed's eyes lit with determination. "A hope beacon. Something so strong it disrupts their hold on this place." Zikar hesitated. "That could destroy the sphere entirely." "Would it destroy you?" Reed asked, her voice softer now. He shook his head slowly. "No, but it would leave us vulnerable." Reed placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then it's a chance we'll take. We survive by working together, not giving up." Voss worked furiously, connecting wires and patching circuits. Zikar began to channel his energy into the sphere, this time focusing on his gratitude for the strangers who had come to his aid. Reed and Tanaka stood guard, their weapons ready but hearts steady. The unseen roared in fury as the sphere's light grew brighter, pulsating with a new intensity. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering. Zikar's emotions, fear tempered with hope, began to destabilize them. "It's working," Voss shouted. "Just a little longer." Reed nodded, her resolve unshaken. She knew this was only the beginning. The unseen weren't just creatures. They were the embodiment of everything humanity and Zikar's people had fought against: despair, fear, and surrender. In this moment, though, Reed knew one thing for sure: they wouldn't give in. Desperation awakens. The bunker pulsed with an unearthly glow as the sphere's energy intensified. Zikar's trembling hands remained on the sphere, his focus split between controlling its power and wrestling with the emotions it fed on. The unseen shrieked and writhed in the chamber, their forms struggling to remain cohesive as the sphere's light grew brighter. "Captain," Voss called out, sweat dripping down her face as she worked to stabilize the connection between the sphere and their portable systems. "The output is fluctuating. If we push this too far, it could explode." "Keep it steady," Reed ordered, her voice unwavering. "This is our only chance." The unseen recoiled further, but didn't retreat completely. Their twisted shapes hovered near the edges of the chamber, feeding on the fear still lingering in the room. Reed could feel it, the gnawing dread pressing down on her, whispering doubts into her mind. "They're not gone yet," Zakar warned. His voice was hoarse, and his legs buckled under the strain. "You need more than light. You need conviction." Reed stepped closer to him, her face set with determination. "Then let's give them something they can't handle." Meanwhile, aboard the Stellar Dawn, chaos reigned. The enemy ship had closed the gap, its relentless assault pushing the Dawn's crew to the brink. Explosions rattled the bridge as sparks flew from damaged consoles. "Captain, we can't hold this position much longer," Lieutenant Diaz shouted over the alarms. "The debris field is destabilizing, and our shields are down to 15%. Reed's voice came through the comms, calm but resolute. "You hold the line, Lieutenant. We're almost ready down here." Diaz swallowed hard, his hands gripping the controls. "Copy that, Captain. But make it quick. They're tearing us apart." As the Dawn wove through the debris field, its thrusters struggling against the increasing gravitational pull, the enemy ship's tactics shifted. It began firing concentrated beams at the debris, sending massive chunks hurtling toward the Dawn like projectiles. Diaz clenched his jaw. "If they don't kill us, the field will." Back in the bunker, the energy in the chamber reached a critical point. The sphere now pulsed in sync with Zakar's emotions, but it wasn't enough. The unseen were adapting, their forms regaining strength as they latched onto the residual fear in the room. Reed's eyes darted to her crew. Tanaka was visibly shaken, her hands trembling on her weapon. Even Voss, usually unflappable, looked pale and uncertain. The air was thick with tension, and the unseen were feeding on it. "Everyone, listen to me," Reed shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Fear is their weapon, but it's also their weakness. We don't have time to be afraid. Focus on what we're fighting for. Each other, survival, hope." Her words struck a chord. Tanaka straightened, her grip on the rifle firming. Voss nodded, her hands moving with renewed purpose as she finalized the connection. Even Zakar seemed emboldened, his energy flowing more steadily into the sphere. The unseen howled in protest, their shapes flickering violently as the sphere's light grew brighter and steadier. For the first time, Reed thought she saw cracks forming in their shadowy forms. "They're breaking," Zakar said, his voice filled with cautious hope. "We can push them back, but it will take everything we've got." Suddenly, the bunker shook violently. Dust and debris rained down as a massive shockwave rippled through the structure. Reed's comm crackled to life. "Captain, this is Diaz," his voice urgent. "The enemy ship just detonated something in the debris field. The entire area is destabilizing. You need to get out of there. Now." Reed glanced at Zakar, who was still locked in concentration. "We're not done yet. Hold them off as long as you can." "You've got 5 minutes, tops," Diaz warned before the comm cut out. Reed turned to Voss. "How long until the connection is stable?" "Another 2 minutes, if this thing doesn't blow up in my face," Voss replied, her voice strained. "Make it 1, Reed said. She turned to Tanaka. "Get ready to cover us." The unseen made one last desperate surge, their forms coalescing into a massive shadow that loomed over the sphere. It roared with an otherworldly sound, its presence suffocating. Reed didn't flinch. "Zakar," she called out. "Now's the time. Show them what desperation really looks like." Zakar's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with the light of the sphere. His entire body seemed to hum with energy as he channeled every ounce of his remaining strength into the glowing orb. "You will not take this from us," he roared, his voice echoing with a power that wasn't his own. The sphere erupted with light, a blinding pulse that filled the chamber and surged outward. The unseen screamed as their forms disintegrated, unable to withstand the raw emotional energy. The bunker shook violently as the pulse expanded, destabilizing the surrounding structure. "It's overloading," Voss shouted, grabbing her equipment. "We have to go. Now." Reed and her team scrambled toward the exit, half carrying Zikar as the bunker began to collapse around them. Behind them, the sphere's light grew brighter and brighter until it consumed everything. As they reached the shuttle and launched back toward the stellar dawn, the rogue planet trembled. From orbit, the crew watched as the sphere's energy erupted in a brilliant explosion, taking the bunker and the unseen with it. "Captain, they're gone," Diaz reported, relief evident in his voice. "But we got incoming gravitational anomalies. We need to jump now." Reed nodded, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Get us out of here, Lieutenant." As the Dawn jumped to safety, Reed glanced at Zikar, who sat weak but alive in the shuttle. His eyes met hers, filled with gratitude. "You didn't abandon me," he said softly. Reed smiled faintly. "No one fights alone, Zikar. Not anymore." Humanity's ingenuity. The stellar dawn emerged from hyperspace, limping but intact. Sparks flew intermittently from damaged consoles, and the air carried the faint metallic tang of overheated circuits. Despite the chaos they had just escaped, the bridge crew allowed themselves a brief moment of relief. "We made it," Lieutenant Marco Diaz said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. "But just barely." Captain Reed stood at the center of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the viewport where the rogue planet was now a distant speck in the void. Her mind raced. The battle against the unseen had left them alive, but no closer to a solution. Worse, Zikar had warned that their destruction on the planet didn't mean they were truly gone. "What's the status on the sphere's data?" Reed asked, turning toward Chief Engineer Voss, who was hunched over a portable console. "It's a mess," Voss replied, running her fingers through her short-cropped hair. "The explosion corrupted most of the files, but I managed to salvage fragments." "It's weird, Captain. The sphere wasn't just an amplifier. It was connected to some kind of network, something far older and more advanced than we've seen." Reed frowned. "A network? You're saying the sphere wasn't unique?" Voss nodded. "Exactly. There could be others out there. If we can find them, we might have a shot at understanding how to fight the unseen." In the medical bay, Zikar lay on a padded bench, his thin frame covered with a thermal blanket. His eyes fluttered open as Dr. Force examined him. "You're lucky to be alive," she said, injecting him with a nutrient solution. "Your body was on the verge of collapse." "I didn't expect to survive," Zikar admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned his head toward Reed, who had just entered the room. "But I owe you all my life. My people. Our hope. It lives because of you." Reed approached, her expression serious but kind. "We're not done yet, Zikar. The unseen aren't defeated, and I need your help to finish this." Zikar's hollow eyes studied her. "You've seen what they are. Fighting them is futile." "We're not like your people," Reed replied firmly. "We don't give up, no matter the odds. You said hope weakens them. We're going to take that to the next level." Zikar hesitated, then nodded. "I will do what I can." Hours later, in the ship's main lab, the salvaged fragments of the sphere's data began to reveal their secrets. Voss, Force, and Zikar worked together, sifting through streams of alien code and diagrams. Reed watched from a distance, her arms crossed. "There's something here," Voss said suddenly, her voice filled with excitement. "Look at this. These spheres weren't just defensive tools. They were designed to interface with emotional frequencies, like a galactic broadcasting system." Dr. Force leaned over the console, her brow furrowed. "Are you saying they could project emotions on a massive scale?" "Exactly," Voss replied. "If we could recreate this technology, we might be able to turn it into a weapon, not just to defend, but to destroy the unseen." Zikar shook his head. The spheres were meant to sustain us, not to attack. If you misuse them, the cost could be catastrophic. Reed stepped forward. Zakar, your people used these spheres to survive. Humanity has always adapted technology to overcome impossible odds. If we can harness this without destroying ourselves, we could save not just your people but countless others. Zakar hesitated, then sighed. If we are to do this, we must be careful. The unseen will sense what you're attempting, and they will not wait for you to finish. As the crew worked tirelessly to replicate the sphere's functionality, strange phenomena began to occur aboard the Dawn. Shadows in the corners of rooms seemed to move independently. Unexplained whispers echoed through the ship's corridors, unnerving the crew. The unseen, Zakar warned during a tense meeting in the command center. They are already here. They know what you're doing. Reed tightened her jaw. Then we work faster. The plan was simple in theory, but perilous in execution. They would create a prototype sphere capable of amplifying collective human emotions, focusing on hope and determination. The prototype would then be broadcast across the network of spheres, disrupting the unseen wherever they lingered. But the clock was ticking. Every hour brought the unseen closer, their presence growing stronger with each passing moment. As the prototype neared completion, the Dawn picked up an energy spike from a nearby star system. The readings matched those of the original sphere. Another sphere, Voss confirmed, her eyes alight with discovery. If we can reach it, we can use its network connection to amplify our signal. It's a gamble, Dias said from the navigation console. The unseen could already be there, waiting for us. Reed straightened. It's a gamble we'll take. Dias, plot a course. Voss, get that prototype ready. Zakar, I'll need you to guide us through the sphere's interface. The ship's engines roared to life, pushing toward the unknown. Every member of the crew knew the risks, but none voiced their fears. They were determined to fight not just for themselves, but for the hope that their actions would make a difference. As the stellar Dawn hurtled toward its destination, Captain Reed stood on the bridge, gazing out at the stars. She knew the final confrontation with the unseen was inevitable. What mattered now was ensuring humanity's ingenuity, and its unyielding hope would shine brighter than their darkest fears. The turning point. The stellar Dawn dropped out of hyperspace into the target system. The distant star cast long shadows across an ancient, shattered planet that drifted silently in the void. Scans confirmed it. Another sphere lay buried deep beneath the surface. Energy readings matched the rogue planet's sphere, Voss reported, her voice tight with urgency. But there's an anomaly. Something's already tapped into it. Unseen, Reed asked, her gaze fixed on the planet below. Zakar stepped forward, his hollow eyes narrowing as he studied the data. Yes, they're feeding on the sphere's residual energy. If we disrupt them, they will retaliate. Reed straightened, determination hardening her features. Then we better move fast. Dias, prepare the shuttle. We're going in. As the shuttle descended into the planet's turbulent atmosphere, the surface came into view. Cracked and scarred, it bore the marks of ancient battles. Deep canyons carved by unknown forces twisted across the terrain, and in the center of it all was a faintly glowing fissure. The sphere's location. The landing was rough, the shuttle buffeted by powerful winds and bursts of static energy. The team disembarked quickly, securing their equipment. The air was heavy, almost oppressive, as if the planet itself was resisting their presence. It's worse here, Zakar muttered, his voice almost drowned out by the howling wind. The unseen are stronger. They've been here for centuries, growing fat on the despair of this world. Reed motioned for the team to move forward, her plasma pistol at the ready. Every step felt heavier, as though invisible hands were trying to drag them down. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, twisting unnaturally. Stay focused, Reed ordered. Fear is their weapon. Don't give them what they want. The team reached the fissure, a jagged opening that descended into the planet's core. The glow from the sphere pulsed faintly below, almost inviting them in. But with each pulse, the air grew colder and the shadows pressed closer. As they descended, Zikar's breathing became labored. They're watching us. They know what we're here to do. The group reached the chamber housing the sphere. Unlike the one on the rogue planet, this sphere was cracked, its surface marred by jagged lines of decay. It pulsed erratically, as if struggling to stay alive. Voss immediately began setting up the prototype amplifier, her hands moving quickly despite the oppressive atmosphere. Tanaka and Reed kept their weapons trained on the encroaching shadows, which had started to take shape, twisting, amorphous figures that writhed at the edge of the chamber. "They're testing us," Zikar said, his voice shaking. "Pushing us to see if we'll break." "We won't," Reed said firmly. "Not today." The first attack came without warning. A wave of darkness surged toward the team, the temperature plummeting as the shadows roared. Reed fired her plasma pistol, but as before, the shots dissolved harmlessly into the void. "Keep them back," Reed shouted, her voice rising over the cacophony. "Voss, how much longer?" "Almost there," Voss yelled, sweat dripping from her brow. "I just need—" Before she could finish, a tendril of shadow lashed out, striking her across the arm. She cried out, dropping her tools. Tanaka stepped in, unleashing a barrage of cover fire that bought Voss enough time to recover. "They're getting stronger," Tanaka called out, her voice strained. Reed turned to Zikar. "We need more than the prototype. You said the sphere responds to emotions. Can we use it now?" Zikar hesitated, his body trembling. "It's too damaged. It might not survive the attempt." "It's a risk we have to take," Reed said, her voice resolute. "If we don't, none of us will survive." Zikar placed his hands on the cracked sphere, his face contorted in concentration. The sphere's glow intensified slightly, and the shadows faltered, their movements slowing. "It's working," Voss said, resuming her work on the prototype. "Keep going." But Zikar's strength was fading fast. The sphere demanded more than he could give, and the cracks on its surface deepened. Reed stepped forward, placing her hand on the sphere beside Zikar's. The moment she made contact, a surge of energy coursed through her, pulling at her emotions. She closed her eyes, focusing on hope, on the faces of her crew, on the mission they had sworn to complete, on the belief that they could prevail. The sphere responded. Its glow grew steadier, brighter, as if feeding on Reed's determination. The shadows shrieked in agony, retreating from the chamber's edges. "You're doing it," Zikar gasped, his voice filled with awe. With the shadows weakened, Voss activated the prototype. A pulse of energy rippled outward, connecting to the sphere's ancient network. The chamber trembled as the signal spread, disrupting the unseen's hold on the planet. But the victory came at a cost. The sphere's cracks widened, its glow faltering. Reed felt it beginning to collapse under the strain. "Zikar, we need to disconnect. Now," she shouted. "No," Zikar said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "It has to finish. If we stop now, they'll recover." "Then we won't stop," Reed said, tightening her grip on the sphere. "Not until it's done." The final pulse erupted from the sphere, a blinding wave of light that consumed the shadows completely. The unseen let out one last, deafening wail before their forms disintegrated, leaving only silence in their wake. The sphere shattered, its remains scattering across the chamber like glowing shards of glass. Reed collapsed to her knees, breathing heavily, but alive. Voss helped her to her feet. "We did it. The signal's out. It's spreading." Reed nodded, her gaze turning to Zikar, who was slumped against the wall, his strength spent, but his face filled with quiet satisfaction. "For the first time," he said softly, "I feel free. A new beginning." The stellar dawn drifted through the quiet of space, its battered hull a testament to the struggle it had endured. Inside, the crew worked in silence, their movements slow, their faces marked by exhaustion. The battle with the unseen had left them shaken but alive. Most importantly, the prototype had worked. The signal was spreading. In the command center, Captain Reed sat in her chair, staring at the readout on the main display. Bright points of light began appearing across the galactic map. Other spheres coming online, their energy signatures flaring to life. Each one amplified the hope and resilience of the signal, pushing back the darkness. "It's working," Voss said quietly, standing beside her. "The network is stabilizing. The unseen won't be able to feed on those worlds anymore." Reed let out a slow breath, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lifting from her shoulders. "We've given them a chance. That's more than they had before." In the medical bay, Zicker lay in a recovery pod, his fragile body cradled by the ship's advanced systems. Dr. Fors monitored his vitals, a faint smile on her lips. "He's going to make it," she said as Reed entered the room. Zicker's eyes opened, dull but alive. He managed a weak smile. "Your people. You did what we could not." Reed pulled a chair beside him, her voice soft but firm. "We didn't do it alone. You gave us the knowledge, the courage to face them. That's what makes us stronger together." Zicker nodded slowly, his voice growing steadier. "The unseen will retreat, but they won't vanish completely. You've struck a blow, but their hunger will drive them to other worlds." "Then we'll be ready," Reed replied. "Humanity doesn't back down. We'll use the network to monitor the spheres, warn other civilizations, and fight back when they return." Zicker's expression turned wistful. "Perhaps there's hope for my people after all." The ship's comm system crackled to life. "Captain, you might want to see this." Diaz's voice came over the intercom. "It's beautiful." Reed and Fors exchanged glances before heading to the bridge. When they arrived, the crew was gathered at the viewport, their faces illuminated by a stunning display. The stars themselves seemed to shimmer, their light refracted by the faint glow of the activated spheres. The network was visible now, a lattice of energy spreading across the galaxy like veins of hope, connecting countless worlds. "Captain," Voss said, her voice thick with emotion, This is bigger than anything we could have imagined." Reed smiled faintly. "It's not just us anymore. This is what unity looks like." As the ship continued its journey, messages began pouring in from other worlds. Alien civilizations thanking humanity for reigniting the spheres and offering their assistance in maintaining the network. The unseen's reign of terror had been halted, their feeding grounds turned into sanctuaries of hope. The crew of the Stellar Dawn was heralded as heroes, but Reed refused to see it that way. "We did what anyone would do when faced with the darkness," she said during a message to Earth. "We lit a fire, and now it's up to all of us to keep it burning." In the quiet moments that followed, Reed found herself standing in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Zicker joined her, walking slowly but with strength in his step. "You've changed the galaxy, Captain," he said. "But what about you? What will you do now?" Reed turned to him, a thoughtful smile on her face. "There's still work to be done. More spheres to find, more worlds to protect. Humanity has always been at its best when rising to a challenge." Zicker nodded, his gaze returning to the stars. "And when the unseen return?" Reed's eyes hardened with resolve. "They'll find us waiting. Stronger. Together." The Stellar Dawn resumed its journey, its mission far from over. But for the first time in a long time, the galaxy wasn't drowning in despair. It was alive with light, a beacon of what could be achieved when hope was stronger than fear. As the ship disappeared into the void, its crew carried with them the knowledge that no darkness was too great to overcome, and that desperation, when channeled through hope, could become the most powerful force in the universe.